Ladies and gentlemen, let's move on to something completely different. David Southwick is our next speaker. David, as you know, is Shadow Minister for Police, Crime Prevention, Corrections and Youth Justice. He's been the MP for Caulfield in the Victorian Parliament since 2010. David's a seventh-generation Australian from a large family and one of the first Jewish families to settle in Australia. He has some pretty impressive role models within his own family. I learnt by reading his maiden speech that both his father and grandmother both received an Order of Australia for services to the community. And David continues that tradition with a strong commitment to his community and helping people be their best. David, it's been a wild year for politics. We've seen the best of it and the worst of it, I think, in many ways. In the early days of the pandemic, I think we were all really heartened by the National Cabinet, which was formed, to see governments from all across the nation and of all persuasions working together closely to tackle the crisis that we were facing. But there have also been some pretty low lows, such as the revelations of the toxic culture in Canberra for women. So, David, in the midst of that roller coaster, what was the most stressful thing that confronted you in the last year?
Thank you very much, Nora. And what a difficult question. Look, for me, I suppose things really turned, as it did for all of us, on a date, March the 13th last year, when we went into our first lockdown. And for me, all of a sudden, our phones just went off the hook and people kind of asking all kinds of issues and questions and wanting help. And soon after, I was sending my staff home and I found myself like the captain of a sinking ship in my office here, not knowing how I was going to cope and how I was going to manage things from that point on. So it's just been a roller coaster after a roller coaster in terms of my job. To hear some of the really stressful things that people have had to go through, people losing loved ones, not being able to get back to see their families, not being here for events. But yeah, it's just been really, really tough. It's been tough personally, I've got to say. How I've been able to cope, for me, we've invented something in our family called cheese o'clock. And it really is time where my wife and I, we go for a little walk and then we sit down and we have some cheese and we have a glass of wine and we just talk about our day. And that is just our little time out and our little part of togetherness. And it probably got us through a whole lot of very difficult times. Put on a few calories along the way, but yeah, it's been a very stressful thing. And I think, as we've heard already today, trying to find your own time and trying to find ways forward is really important.
Yeah, incredibly important. And is there a particular cheese that works better?
My wife and I have different types. So we have I create the cheese platter, so there's something for everyone.
Terrific. David, I'll hand over to you for the rest of your talk.
Yeah, look, I wanted to talk today about the truth being somewhere in the middle. And I think, very much in my world of politics, and the real difficulty around what we're seeing in the media and with our leaders is left and right is becoming more and more polarising, probably more polarising than I think we've ever been. We're in the most divisive situation than I think we've ever seen ourselves in. The two things that people would never talk about were religion and politics, and now they're probably one of the first things that people talk about. Religion more so from a spiritual element, and maybe that's not necessarily a bad thing. Politics, which was something which was always taboo, is what I find more and more since the pandemic is people are very much wearing their heart and their emotions on their sleeve. They either think the government of the day has done a fantastic job or they've done a horrible job. They either love or they hate you. And it's really, really polarizing. So I think the challenges ahead is how do we find truth in the middle? How do we bring people together? Where do leaders lead? And I think the difficulty is, and the challenges is particularly the media, our messaging, and also everybody trying to craft their way and their position forward. And so we've got a lot of challenges, and I wanted to just start by the challenges and then kind of give you where I think we can kind of get through it to the end. So, and for me, politics was never something that I kind of had a career of involvement in. For me, it was all about trying to help others. And as you said, Nora, my family was very much in terms of giving back. And I think as a Jewish boy, the idea of tithing and helping others was an element. Community was an element. And I went from a cosmetics business and being a DJ to being a politician. So so for me, it's always been about people. And I think, that's where a lot of my colleagues tend to lose the sight about, we're forgetting of who we're here for and what we're here for. The biggest confronting element for me from a media perspective was as a student and at university, I was up actually, ironically, leading a student protest. And it was when fees were being introduced. And I thought, and I've always had this sense of feeling that education is a leveler. You need to give everybody the opportunity of an equal education and let people run their own race. And the rest is really up to them in terms of what the path they want to choose and what race they want to run. So I was always been a strong advocate for that. And I was up leading a student protest. And what happened was the absolute kids were going nuts. We had the then Education Minister, John Dawkins. A lot of people on the thing is probably too young for that, but John Dawkins was coming to Victoria University to speak to students, and I had the opportunity to debate him. So that was very exciting for me. Next minute, all of a sudden, cakes and all the morning tea of the thing was all thrown at the door. People were going nuts. And I stood up on a desk and I tried to calm everybody, and we did. We calmed everyone. We settled it down, and I said, look, we're going to get our chance to debate the Education Minister. Can everyone settle? And they did. The nightly news had it flipped that had me, even the student leader tried to settle the students, but that didn't work, and they showed the cakes being thrown and all the rest of it. They flipped the footage. And reflecting back today, that's how media works. I was talking just to the panelists before we started. Yesterday, I was doing a story on Raf Epstein on ABC, and Raf's messaging is very, very polarising from one side. And then tonight I was doing Sky News with Peter Credlin, and that's very different from another side. And we don't have a middle. We don't have, where's the middle? Where's the truth in the middle? And unfortunately, politicians will effectively go for whatever side suits them, and they won't talk to the middle, and they'll go where their friends are. And unfortunately, it's about how much you can beat the other side, and that's the combative part of politics, and that's a difficult part of politics. But I do want to just briefly say that there is probably about 80% of our job that the public don't see, and that is the work that we do in the Parliament on committees. There are a lot of the things that we change, and there's a lot of stuff that's never get reported that is about politicians working together for the betterment of total good. And, I think about the Nazi swastika that we're looking at getting banned here in Victoria. We'll be the first place in Australia, the first in many countries around the world to actually have a ban on the Nazi swastika. Well, that's being done in a bipartisan way. It was done through a committee. It's been done through a lot of work. And, we're going to get an outcome because it's got two sides of politics working together. And that's where outcomes can be done. And that's where the middle works. Can I say there are a lot of challenges, and I think particularly with this pandemic, a huge amount of challenges going forward. We heard just in our previous speakers the issues around truth, the issues around resilience. I think is such a big one in terms of people dealing with their own anxiety, with their own stress. Where is a lot of this going to lead us going forward? And we need to be able to work through that. And I think that's going to be really important as how we go about doing it. I think one of the biggest things that we've got to understand is the echo chamber in which we operate in. And I think social media has got a big element to play here. It can be a wonderful tool, and I know Zoom and technology is fantastic. But if you look at social media, and particularly it's all skewed about winning our friends. How many friends do we have? Who are we talking to? And unfortunately, social media works with your view will attract other people of the same view. And so all of a sudden, if you think that the government are shocking, then a whole lot of people who all think that the government is shocking are going to start communicating with you. Before you know it, everyone's telling you how bad the government is and how wonderful your point of view is. And that happens on all sides. And unfortunately, all it does is it further gives you confirmation that your view is the right view. And what it does is it's promoting extremism from both sides, from the left and from the right. So my challenge to all of you is, how do we get to the middle? How do we get to the authentic voice? And how do we question what people from media might tell you, what you hear on social media, and what is the truth? And what is where do we go in terms of being able to get that? And I challenge everybody that has a particular view, because again, we've become more and more tribal in Australia and in Victoria. We started always picking whatever football side we would support, and now we've become more tribal in terms of, are we stronger to left or right side of politics and our views? Is talk to somebody from the other side and hear their view, and don't necessarily agree with it, but at least give the opportunity to be able to see what elements of that are fair and reasonable, and what elements of that could you take into your perspective to try and get that balanced view. Because the concern is, we don't want the extremism. We want something that senses more into the centre. The truth is in the centre, and that's where we need to be. And for any of us to be able to succeed as a society, we've got to look at being able to challenge ourselves, challenge our views, being able to question, being able to debate, and being able to really test ideas. And I think that's got to be the innovation going forward, is how do we test some of those ideas that we have, those thoughts, those beliefs, to be able to ultimately get to something that makes more sense and more balance for all of us. And now, there are a lot of things that all of a sudden I get compartmentalized because I'm a liberal, that, we don't care, or, we're not supportive of the environment or youth or a whole range of things, which is so far from the truth. And so I would ask anyone to challenge it, to ask, to meet, and to focus on things going forward. I wanted to finish with just 5 key things going forward as a way out. The first thing that I think we've all learnt from the pandemic is to live each day. Living each day is just so important. Live it, and we see it in Israel. People in Israel live each day like it's the last. And I think there's a great, great lesson from that, is because it promotes happiness. You see people, whether it's on the beach, whether it's with their family and their friends, they're actually enjoying life. And one of the strengths out of the pandemic is people are spending more time with their families. They're doing hobbies. They're learning how to sew. They're doing things they never, ever thought they would do before. I've spent a lot of time cooking. I love it. Secondly, search for the other voice. If you're an age reader, read the Herald Sun and see what they're doing occasionally. If you're an ABC listener, maybe tune into Sky News and see what the other people are thinking about. Listen at least and appreciate what other people are thinking and saying. Family and friends, take time off to spend some time, and I think get yourself off the merry-go-round, and that's what or the ladder, or whatever you want to call it, and that's what COVID has enabled us to do, is to actually say, you know what, I'm going to go for that walk. I'm going to spend time with a family. I'm going to do something that I always promised myself to do that I'm actually now going to do. Be positive. And I think be positive is such an important element, because we have so much negativity around us, and we can get buried in negativity. And I think we have to look at a positive way forward. And the truth is in the middle. And my final thought to all of you, and it's something that I absolutely live my day by each and every day, and that is that there is no such thing as a problem, but only an opportunity. And I really, really believe that. We get tested each and every day. We wake up with issues. We wake up with people throwing things at us. But at the end of the day, I turn those into every possible opportunity. You're not always going to win. You're not always going to find success, but you are going to at least do the best you possibly can in going forward. And that's the message that I wanted to leave you all with today.
David, thanks so much. I think so many of us over the past year looked at our political leaders and thought, whatever we thought of them, still thought, my God, who'd want to be in their shoes at the moment trying to deal with this, as we were all just making it up on how we would get through it. But to hear that you've come through that and still have such a positive attitude is fantastic, I think. The other one that I think is really important is that insight about that we all have a role to play in finding that truth in the middle and exposing ourselves to different views. I think even pre-COVID, the amount of change and disruption that was occurring in every aspect of our society was so profound that all the givens, all the things that we take for granted and which inform our decisions no longer hold. And so, making sure that we're exposing ourselves to different viewpoints, that we're listening to the points of the other and are open to actually understanding things from others' perspectives. I tell a lot of my colleagues to find a millennial to reverse mentor them, to, again, make sure you're in the flow of what's happening out there. So important. Thank you so much for that. It was terrific.